What is good, everyone? Welcome to the channel. My name is Paul and I make videos about Japanese society, life, and culture from the viewpoint of a long-term foreign resident. I have been in Japan for 18 years and today I'm going to be talking to you about 4 reasons why it is great or good to be a foreign resident in Japan. This is actually a balance to last week's topic where I talked about 4 reasons why it's not so good to be a foreign resident in Japan, and I want to emphasize that the point is talking about foreign resident issues. So I'm not going to talk about like Japan is safe and has great trains that always run on time or something like that. That benefits everyone, tourists, Japanese, and foreign residents alike. So I'm focusing on things that are specific to foreign residents of Japan and why Japan could be a great place for us. Now, the first one is actually exactly the same as the first one from last week, although that time it was the negative point. Today I'm going to be talking about the positive of always standing out and not really fitting in Japanese society. So why is that a good thing? Because it's going to bring you potential opportunities and chances that you might not otherwise get. These might be cultural experiences, it might be meeting interesting people, and it might even be financially lucrative. For example, I was once just engaged in conversation by a random person who, when they found out that I teach at a university and one of my specialties is public speaking, he said, "Well, I work at blah 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 major Japanese company and I have some research teams that could be better at giving presentations, so could you come and do some master classes?" We drew up a contract, 16 classes, and there you go. Pretty lucrative side job for a while. I've had some cultural experiences that were really random. I was walking home from work one day and there was actually a neighborhood festival going on that I just stopped and watched. They were carrying a omikoshi, or a portable shrine that you see at most Japanese festivals. And as I was watching, they noticed me and they're like, "Hey, come on, join in." And next thing I know, I am carrying the mikoshi in my work clothes next to everyone else in their kind of festival garb. And it was fun. And they gave me a beer, and it was just a random cultural encounter. And it's just because I stand out. They weren't pulling random Japanese out of the crowd, which is one caveat I have to this, which is if you are a stealth foreigner, meaning you're from East Asia like Korea or China, or you are of Japanese descent, you won't really get this benefit because you're going to blend in more easily. So that first reason is basically how sometimes extraordinary things will just happen out of the blue because you look visibly not Japanese. The next one is actually how even ordinary things in Japan can often feel quite extraordinary. So my friend Josh and I, he lived in Japan previously, and we used to have this joke. We had this line that we would sometimes say that ever so often you just stop in the middle of your day and you think to yourself, "Holy, I'm in Japan." And I'm gonna be honest with you, 18 years later, that's still the case. I still have my moments where I'm just like, "Holy, I'm in Japan." And I think that's one of the most rewarding things about living here, actually, is ordinary, everyday, mundane things take on like other layers of meaning and enjoyment, feelings of accomplishment, being able to function in the culture, getting through your daily life and interacting with Japanese people, learning some new things. I feel like I wouldn't have the same experiences and enjoyment of just like being somewhere if I'd only stayed in my hometown or even home country. Being in Japan, those moments continue where I'm just like, it's really special to be here. And I think part of that is because the culture is so very different than the US or Europe and South America, etc. I think maybe this one won't apply so much if you're a foreigner coming from Korea or Singapore, where the culture might be a little more similar. But for someone like me who's coming from the US, it's definitely the case that Japan just has a ring of specialness because it's so different. Now, before I get into the last two, I'm going to very quickly say that I have a podcast. It's called the Journal of Japan Journeys podcast. And That podcast is me simply interviewing other long-term foreign residents, and I'm trying to get unique stories out there from different people onto why they came to Japan and why they have stayed here for so long. So if you're interested in hearing those unique stories, please check out the Journal of Japan Journeys podcast. I will link it in the description below. Now, the third reason why it's really good to be a foreign resident in Japan is we tend to kind of float outside of society in certain ways. And what I mean by that is, as a foreigner living here, we benefit a lot from the society and being helped out and guided through the society. But we often don't have the same obligations or expectations levied towards us that actual Japanese people do. We can live here very comfortably and not have some of the discomforts that actual Japanese people have. And usually, if there's some kind of societal expectation or some kind of obligation that's supposed to be met, two things might happen in the case of a foreigner. One is they don't meet that obligation or don't know what to do in that particular societal issue. It's not really a problem in the eyes of the Japanese because they think, well, it's a foreigner. Of course they don't know what to do in this situation. It's shogunai, it can't be helped. And so you have kind of a get out of jail free card. On the other hand, if you do know what to do in the situation, or you do actually fulfill your obligation in something, then you often get praised for it. Like, wow, the foreigner actually knows what to do in this situation. That's amazing. You really know Japan. And so it ends up being kind of a win-win. And Japanese people don't get this because the expectation is atarimae. It's, of course, they're Japanese. They're going to know what they're supposed to do in these certain social situations or know how to fulfill their obligations. And of course, as a foreigner, this is absolutely a double-edged sword. Last week I talked about making efforts to fit in, and if you're always playing that get out of jail free card and not living up to obligations, you're not going to really be accepted in Japan, or it's going to be a lot harder. And you also kind of put a bad face to foreigners everywhere if you're always taking advantage of the system. And why perpetuate that stereotype that foreigners don't know anything about Japan? Because that's obviously not true. So yeah, you don't want to play that too much. But I still make mistakes. I still sometimes miss obligations. And I don't face the same scrutiny that a Japanese person would. And again, I have to add a caveat again, because if you look Japanese, even if you're not, and especially if you're of Japanese descent and look Japanese, you don't get that get out of jail free card. It actually seems to be based on looks. One of my guests on the podcast, Yushi, she's Chinese, lived in Japan for a long time, and she was saying that compared to other foreigners who've been in Japan a long time, because she looks Japanese, the automatic expectation is that she's going to understand more deeply or more completely obligations and, you know, social situations, etc., and what to do in these instances. And so if you look Japanese, you might not have this same sort of benefit, because I guess looks is enough to make it atarimae, or of course you know what it is too, because you look this way and therefore you know what to do. It's just how people are fit into boxes in a way, I guess. Alright, the fourth reason why it is good to be a foreign resident in Japan is Japan really has a way of opening up and deepening your appreciation for a lot of things in life. Even things that you would kind of think are perfectly ordinary and not really necessitating thinking on a deeper level about. But Japan is such a richly detailed and meticulous, carefully thinking culture that has developed over so many centuries that there's just deeper appreciations of things here that when you tap into as a foreign resident and go down those rabbit holes of learning yourself, it's really an enriching experience that, again, if you just stayed in your home country, you're never going to experience. And I would say even if you moved to a country like Germany or Australia that was more similar in culture to your own, it still wouldn't be the same kind of depth of culture, of experience and learning. Japan just has a deep, rich history of so many layers that when you dive down into it, you just are able to open up so much more of your perspective and ideas about the world. And I'm going to give you a specific example, just one from my own life, and it seems like a totally mundane thing. That is food. Americans, there's foodies in America, there's people who love food and go out of their way to get good food, but it's just not the same as it is in Japan. Japan takes a so complete view. Again, meticulous detail, freshness, quality, seasonal ingredients, traveling for the purpose of food. That's something I do now. I will think of going to a place just to eat whatever local specialty is there, and any sightseeing that might be there is kind of a secondary consideration. My appreciation of just food has so greatly deepened because of living in Japan and the way the Japanese culture, views and takes on these, what you might think is completely ordinary, like seasonal ingredients. It's not just fancy restaurants here in Japan that use seasonal ingredients, it's your mom and pop places on the corner that have been there 60 years. This fish is in season now, so that's the fish that's on the menu. It's just perfectly natural. It's not like going to the Olive Garden or Applebee's or some chain store and it's like, well, tonight's special is buffalo wings for no particular reason. I know I might be painting an unfair picture of America at this exact moment, and certainly if you're from Europe, you have those deep, rich food cultures as well, but I'm gonna argue that Japan is still different, and 18 years in, I'm not anywhere close to peeling back those multi-layers. So Japan just grants you this kind of appreciation for things. Alright, I'm going to freely admit I'm not sure I explained that last one incredibly well, but it's definitely a truth that I believe in after living here all these years. And I believe that it wouldn't have happened that way if I just stayed in America over that same time period. Okay, that's all for this particular video. I want to thank you for watching this one, and if you've made it this far and haven't yet hit the like button, now is the time to do so, and subscribe if you haven't already. I want to thank you again for watching this particular video, and look for my one next week, once every Friday. See you then. Peace.